fun. Just give me your name, the name of your book, and where you're talking to us from.
Yeah, my name is JL Hancock, and I go by Jim. Talking to you from San Diego, California, and my book is The Hawk Enigma.
Why did you decide to write a novel instead of doing a short story or a comic strip, for example?
Well, so like I said before, I hadn't really thought much about writing for anyone else. But in 2018, I found a small, I don't know if you call it a mass on my back. And I'd been traveling a lot for work, and I ended up I went to the dermatologist, and she gave me a punch biopsy where they take a small sampling of it. Long story short, came back as melanoma, and I ended up having to go through different elements of surgery and things like that to remove the cancer. But I found myself in the midst of a bit of an existential crisis at the time. And the thing I kept realizing is that because of my previous work in the military, a lot of what I did was a relative secret to my children and my family. And I didn't think that they would ever really know me in a way that I wanted them to know me. And I had this very strong impression that I needed to write. I just didn't know what. And about a year later, I was at a symposium at Caltech listening to a woman by the name of Viviana Gradinaru, who's the head of the Gradinaru lab at Caltech, and they specialize in something called optogenetics. And I'd never heard of optogenetics before or anything of the sort, but she was talking about how they were using machine learning algorithms to identify appropriate proteins for these different types of studies they were doing. And it was at that moment, it seemed like the whole plot kind of popped in my head, and I was ready for it. And I didn't know where to start, so I just started putting whatever thoughts I had on paper, and then just didn't quit for about 6 months. And after that 6 months, I had my first draft of the book, and then I just kept iterating on that until I felt like I'd had it right, and started pushing it through all the editing processes.
Yeah, I have to say that it is without a doubt the most unique concept I've had in my 12 years of judging this competition.
Oh, really?
There's a lot of tech in here. How did you get that technology?
Yeah.
Experience it, if you can tell me without having to kill me. Did you experiencing it? Did you research? How did you get to that point?
I spent 20 years in the military as something called a cryptologist. And cryptologists specialize in the interception and exploitation of radio waves and communication. And that's not just the content, like if I wanted to listen in on a phone call or something like that. It's also about the actual, how the radio propagation works and all the other stuff that comes with that. And because of that, I ended up having to work with a lot of different exciting emerging technologies. And I ended up working with the intelligence communities as well as in special operations with special operations forces. I eventually screened for a program where I embedded with the SEAL teams and ended up doing multiple combat deployments with them. And then the last 6 or 7 years of my career, though, I worked as the senior enlisted advisor of the Future Concepts and Innovation Directorate, which is kind of an advanced research and development arm at the headquarters of the SEAL teams. And so I went around, and my whole job was to identify disruptive and emerging technology, figure out ways in which it could be implemented in the next 5 to 10 years, and then experiment with it. And from that, I was exposed to a lot of very interesting concepts and ideas, especially in the world of artificial intelligence and machine learning and things like that. And that's ultimately where a lot of that came from for the book.
How do you create a character like Voodoo who is endlessly interesting? Is he a conglomeration of different people, or did you base him on a single person?
The answer to that is yes. So like I said, this was kind of part of the book was a way of helping my children know me. And so I couldn't help but put a lot of me in the book right now. And that's what every new author does. And it's a bit of a cliche.
Yeah.
However, it worked out in my favor because I had kind of a cool life, and I'm having kind of a cool life.
Yeah.
And so I was a river guide before I joined the Navy. And I did work with those aspects of special operations, but I thought, but there's other aspects that are completely different. Like the aspect of the dreams in the book, that was completely based off of dreams my brother used to have on the river, where he would have these almost prophetic dreams that would tell him what the river was going to be like the next day. And it was disturbing how accurate his dreams would be. He'd be like, tomorrow, dude, the water's going to be hitting this rock just like this, and you're going to have to hit right on it. And I was like, whatever. And then we'd go on the river the next day, and exactly as he said.
You're like, all right, creepy but cool.
It was super cool. And so there were so many elements like that I wanted to add into the book when I wrote it.
With all these twisting plots and technology in there, it's hard to keep things straight, but you must have a really good beta reader. Can you tell me about your beta reader?
My wife has an English degree, so I had her read different sections a lot. She was the one who helped me with my modifiers, because she would get really hung up on a line and be like, this part, I can't, my brain goes here. And it would frustrate me because I'd be like, don't you just get it? It's just right there. Nobody else has this problem. I'm like, okay, I have to take this into account. And so she helped out dramatically with everything that I wrote.
Yeah, I have a beta reader. My wife is well, actually, I call her almost my alpha reader because she's in early, but same thing.
Yeah.
I watch her face and I ask her to read aloud to me. So she'll sit down and she starts reading it, and I watch her eyebrow. And when she looks like Mr. Spock, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, I get that look. I have to be ready for my wife to read it, to be honest, because if I'm not at the stage where I can take the criticism yet, I have a hard time with it. I don't want it to adversely affect our relationship. So I'm take really to heart the idea that the first draft of what you write in your book has to be for you as the writer. That has probably been the best advice I've gotten, because I would write a chapter and then I'd send it off to somebody and be like, what do you think? And I kept doing that. And then I realized you need to stop and just write and let it out and trust yourself. And then once you get through it, you're like, okay, I got the plot, I got the story, I think it's okay. Then you get your feedback. And then that's when you start writing the better versions of it. You go back into the true editing process. Yep. But too early, I wasn't ready, especially as a new author. Such a vulnerable position.
Is there any question that I didn't ask you that you wish I would have asked you?
You know, there's questions I'm glad you didn't ask me.
Well, if you'd like to ask yourself one, I'll just nod as if it came out of my mouth.
I think one thing that I think that is important in this story is the aspect of the trauma that is felt by the characters, and how that drives both the positive and negative attributes that I told you about, that pulls out their vulnerabilities. And why did I choose to write about an individual like Voodoo who has post-traumatic stress?
Yeah.
And is dealing with that. That probably would be the one question. Why did you include that in the story?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really, I know very few of my friends that do not live with that. And after 20 years of combat, especially in that community, whether it be traumatic brain injury or post-traumatic stress, I refer to it in the book as operator syndrome, which is sometimes what they call it. It's the modern day version of shell shock. That I have so many friends that are suffering from it, and I wanted them to know that they're seen and they're heard in a way that I could only appreciate. A lot of those, the way that I described certain things that Voodoo was going through were my friends' descriptions of it when I would sit with them. Fortunately, I don't have any of those symptoms or any of those things. Even though I was right beside, everybody reacts and responds differently.
Right.
And I'm grateful that I don't, but at the same time, it's going to be a recurring theme in my books, because you're having individuals that are trying to deal with very difficult and complicated scenarios in life, both on and out, both in and out of the battlefield. And I feel that those battles are the ones that are the most important for the reader to understand. But it also makes the story significantly more interesting to watch them fight on so many levels and succeed.
Yeah. Well, speaking of success, fantastic novel. Congratulations. I really enjoyed reading it. I believe Dirk Kussler, as we speak, is finishing up your novel right now.
Great.
So
awesome.
So if any of that tech you have, you can direct toward Denver, because that's where I think he is right now. Maybe you can manipulate him a little bit.
Oh, great. Sweet.
All right.